عليكم. نعم face to face. No one sits for me. Yeah, it's fun for me.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My beloved brothers and my beloved sisters, if you like to perform your sunnah praise, inshallah, we begin the khutbah in 5 minutes time. Jazakumullah. Perform your sunnah. Brothers and sisters, everyone coming into the building, please quickly perform your sunnah prayers, inshallah. The khutbah will begin in approximately 5 minutes time. Please do make sure that you keep your masks on, keeping your nose and mouth covered at all times. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My beloved brothers, my beloved sisters coming in, please come in, sit down, settle down, inshallah. The khutbah is about to begin now. Bismillah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. ونشهد أن سيدنا حبيبنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا. أما بعد. My brothers and sisters, of course I'm going to be talking about Palestine today. It is the most important topic, and it is the most important struggle of our time. The struggle of Palestine symbolizes struggle for freedom. Struggle of Palestine symbolizes struggle against apartheid, against racism, against brutalization, against occupation, against colonization, against settler illegal occupation of the people's land. Struggle against Palestine represents true civilization. A civilization that is formed and based on fundamental principles of equality between all human beings. Whether you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or people of the faith or no faith, you are equal as human beings. In any place you live, you have equal right to live there with dignity and honor. You have every right to buy, purchase, build, do business with legitimately in that country or that place, as long as you are legitimate where you live. What you can't have is you cannot come and invade my home, occupy it, kick me out, and then claim my home, my land as yours. You can't do it. Palestine is a symbol of our struggle against all forms of occupation. Brothers and sisters, I need to give you a bit of a background and a timeline about what's happened in Palestine and how we got here. While the history of Palestine and Israel is often presented as complex, but the very basic dynamics of the situation are not in fact hard to understand. We'll explain, inshallah, as briefly as I can, what happened and how it happened. In 1897, modern political Zionism, a nationalist movement to establish a Jewish state, emerged from Europe. The first Zionist Congress, held in Switzerland, settles on the idea of colonizing Palestine, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire, the Uthmani Khilafah. In 1917, Foreign Secretary of Britain at that time, Arthur Balfour, made a declaration promising that UK's government will fully support the creation of a nation home or national home for Jewish people in Palestine, despite the fact that inhabitants of Palestine were 90% Arabs, Christians and Muslims, and a small number of Jewish communities were living there too. In 1918 to 1948, what happened is what made the rest of the story interesting. In 1917, when Arthur Balfour made the declaration, He made the declaration after having and holding secret meetings with various leaders of the Zionist movement. At that time, Ottoman Empire was declared as enemy of European allies who were fighting the enemies, because the Ottomans sided with the enemy for Europe, for France, Britain, and many of the allied countries. During that time, Ottomans were created and given a name as the enemy of the world. They were called the sick man of Europe. They were given awful names. And Ottomans were ruling the entire Muslim world at that time. Within the Arabian Peninsula, what we now know as Saudi Arabia, that used to be known as Hijaz. A man called Hussein ibn Ali, not Hussein ibn Ali in the original sense, this is the latest one. Hussein ibn Ali was given the sheriff's position by the Ottoman Khalif, Abdul Hamid, who said, you can be the ruler of Hijaz, looking after the affairs of people of Hijaz, Mecca and Medina especially. He had a nationalistic tendency and he did not like the Ottomans. And within the Ottomans, the Uthmani Khilafah, young Turks began a new movement to secularize Turkey, to take away the Uthmani Khilafah, or the role of religion and the Caliph's role from the public life, and slowly they removed elements of Islam from Uthmani Khilafah, slowly but surely. The Muslims in Hijaz and Sham, Syria as we know it today, did not like what the Ottomans were doing in the name of Uthmani Khilafah, but were slowly distancing themselves from Islam. But the Hijazi Muslims of Arab descent, Muslims of Syria of Arab descent, they were inside their hearts developing a nationalistic thought, an idea that they saw proliferating in Europe in the form of nation states. So they wanted to get rid of the Ottomans as soon as possible and form their own independent country. When Uthmani Khilafah couldn't control some of these revolts amongst the Arab tribes, British and the French took advantage. They whispered in the ears of Hussein ibn Ali, who was the Sharif of Mecca, as was known as, or the ruler of Hijaz, that he should create a revolt against the Uthmani Khilafah and kick them out. The Turks must get out of the Arab land, for our people deserve independence. This was the promise made to the Arabs. The Hijaz region declared independence, kicked out the Ottomans first. Then the ruler of Hijaz sent his son over to Sham, the area of Syria, Iraq, all of that region, Lebanon and Palestine, and created an Arab revolt against the Turks. And they were also kicked out. But all along, the British and the French were inspiring them, saying, get rid of them, get rid of them, get rid of them. They had an ulterior motive. British and the French had an ulterior motive in their mind. Their motive was, we need to carve up this Middle Eastern region by spheres of influence and control between France and Britain, by the support and blessings of the Russian Empire at that time and the Italians, who were also empirical in their rules. And they were all along planning and plotting with the Zionist movement that when they carve up, Britain will always demand that they have rights and rule and influence over Palestine. And when they have it, they will engineer a change, a social change, a demographic change, until a substantial number of Jewish population from across Europe have migrated, and they will hand over Palestine to the Zionist movement so they can establish their dream land, a land for the Jewish people, a home for the Jewish people. That was the intention of the Brits all along. They took the French with them, they persuaded the Russians, and they persuaded the Italians to support them. Americans were not with them at that time. Americans were against it. Americans did not want Middle East to be carved up between France and Britain. Americans wanted the whole of Middle East to be nation state, and one country perhaps for all the Arabs. Amongst all of that, somebody called Arthur Balfour defied all of those conversations. He made a declaration. Smart move, he made a declaration. That declaration said Britain will do everything possible within its power to help the Jewish communities find a home, a nation, a home for themselves, a national home for themselves. But at the same time, the very British government promised the Palestinians, when they took Palestine after carving up the Middle East, that we will also protect you, we'll never abandon you. So they made two promises. We will give Palestine to the Zionist lobby and its demand for a Jewish home, and they made a promise to the Palestinians that we will never betray you, we'll always look after your interests. In 1920s and 30s, when the Arab revolt started within the Palestinian society, the British realized it is impossible for them to control this. So they, in 1945 or 46, somewhere along those times, took the whole thing to United Nations. And in the United Nations, it was divided in half. Half to the Palestinians and half to the Jewish people. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened in Europe with the Jewish communities, with Holocaust and under the Nazis, awful massacre, awful crime against Jewish people. In their millions they were killed, they were gassed, they were beyond description treated worse than an animal would treat another animal. Despicable chapter of European history. And it is so sad, it is so despicable. Our friends and our brothers and our sisters, our fellow people of faith of Ibrahim, as we call them, the family of Ibrahim, rather, the triangle of Ibrahim, the same family, suffered so much at the hands of the Europeans. But do you know what the Europeans decided? Instead of paying the Jewish communities for the massacre that they inflicted, for the Holocaust that they inflicted, for the pogrom and all the other nasty things that they had inflicted on the Jewish communities, they made the Palestinians pay for it by imposing and dividing and colonizing again their land and giving it to Jewish communities who did not live or belong to that region. They didn't. Less than 3% of the population of Palestine were Jewish when in 1917 Arthur Balfour made the declaration. And yet by 1948 the demographic changes had been orchestrated by British in such a way that there was a sizable presence of Jewish communities in there, and they were powerful enough and they were given enough support politically as well as militarily to create their own state. Brothers and sisters, the rest is history. In 1948, 750,000 Palestinians lost their homes, their properties, their belongings, many of their families butchered, killed, and they all migrated to the Arab countries in the neighboring areas. They became refugees, either in their own land or in the neighboring countries. Brothers and sisters, in 1967, the Arab countries declared a war, 6 days war, in which Israel took over lots of land from the Arab countries. In 1987, illegal settlement program began. In 1993 and 95, US brokered a series of agreements between Israelis and Palestinian leadership, known as the Oslo Accord. In 2000, Israelis increasingly brutalized the communities by its brutal military rule, ongoing seizure of Palestinian land, igniting second intifada for the Palestinian community. And then again in 2002, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2008, 2010, 2012, 2014, 2018, and 2021. Repeated attack and incursions on the Palestinian land, repeatedly made them homeless, repeatedly demolished their houses, repeatedly killed them, shoot them dead, repeatedly dehumanized them, brutalized them, and the world stays silent. American president watched what happened for 11 days. After 11 days and over 200 people's death, then did he said to the Israelis, stop now. He could have said that on the day one. He didn't. Mr. Biden, that makes you and I, all of us, question your motive. Why would you wait to see more massacre until you bring this to an end? You know, brothers and sisters, I don't blame anybody else but Britain for this. It was Britain who made the mess. It is the British government that made the declaration, after Balfour made the declaration, the illegal declaration of a land that never belonged to Britain, of a land that was not British own. Britain never had Palestine, it was not theirs. How dare they give the land away to a group of people that they have brutalized and massacred in Europe? How dare they do that? The original sin was committed by Britain. And then Arabs were foolish in accepting the promise of Brits and the French to say, yes, we'll give you an independent land. You know what they said in the peace accord that they held in Paris in 1919? You know what they said? They said Arabs are not civilized enough to deserve independent countries. They need to be colonized by us, Europeans. We need to teach them what civilization is. The same Arabs one day gave rise to mathematics, gave the world medicine, gave the world astronomy, gave the world physics, gave the world technology, gave the world science, gave the world civilization, arts, and all sophistications. The same Arabs were now told by Brits and French that the Arabs are not civilized. How dare French and Brits treat the Arabs like that? But you know what? It was the Arabs' fault too. You fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, because you thought my nation state is more important than the unity of the Muslims together. And Allah says in the Quran, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, and hold on together to the rope of Allah. Whether you are Arab or whether you're not Arab, whether you're a Turk or you're Pakistani, whether you're a Somali or Sudani, whether you are a Tunisian or Algerian, you are belonging to the same Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and your unity is more important than your nation states. And when Muslims fell for this duped idea of nation states, we see the state of the Ummah today, divided, destroyed, weak to the core, unable to do anything, completely impotent, and disempowered from doing anything, because this Ummah has been divided by national anthem, national flag, national this, national that, and is being ruled by despots and dictators who have no other power, spineless, principleless, absolute illegitimate regimes across the globe, because the Ummah is divided, and the Ummah fell for this duped idea called nationalism that created nation states. Brothers and sisters, you know, Palestinian crisis will not be solved until the Muslim Ummah rises to the reality and that they're not nation states, they're one Ummah. Muslims are not nation states, they're one Ummah, they belong to the same religion called Islam. They belong to the same Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They pray in the same direction called the Kaaba, in the direction of Qibla in Mecca. My brothers and sisters, we have the same idea, same belief, and same goals and priorities, and that is justice and peace for all of humanity, not a group of people or a select bunch of people, no, for everyone. So brothers and sisters, I want to finish giving you a history lecture about what happened, but you need to know. It started with betrayal, lies, deceit, and giving a land of the people that never belonged to Britain to another people who never belonged to that land. Then lie, that Palestine was a land without people. That's a lie, and a big lie. Palestine has always had people. Palestine has always had people. We should not ever cower to such lies and stop talking about the truth behind the Palestinian-Israeli conflict right now. May Allah forgive us for our failures. May Allah forgive us for our utter helplessness. May Allah forgive us for the rulers who are ruling and occupying most of the Muslim countries. If they have no hidayah in their destiny, may Allah remove them. And may Allah replace them with better people. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I'm reading a book called How the British or the West Stole Democracy from the Middle East. It's an interesting book in which a European scholar, historian writes a true, frank and honest account of what happened. If you get a chance, read it. There are two books that we should all read. This one, and there is a book about India and how it was divided called Freedom at Midnight. Another fantastic book to read. But brothers and sisters, I want to finish my speech today by telling you a few more facts. Criticizing occupation is not anti-Semitism. Do you understand? Criticizing occupation does not make you an anti-Semite. Calling Israel a state which is an apartheid state doesn't make you an anti-Semite. Standing up for the rights of humanity and against brutalization of the people, dehumanization of Palestinians, doesn't make you anti-Semite. Do you know, brothers and sisters, many soldiers who were ex-military serving in the Israeli military have come out and said, we are trained and taught to dehumanize Palestinians. We don't look at them as human beings because they don't deserve to be human beings. And when you think like that, you can do anything to any human being because you don't even think they're humans. Dehumanization of Palestinians have been happening for the last 70 years systematically by a state apparatus. That state is called the State of Israel, and I call that state a racist state, an apartheid state, a state that is illegitimate amongst those people over there. The whole area belongs to the native Palestinians. Whether they're Muslim, Jewish or Christian, I don't care what religion you have. You're the native people. You are the rightful owner of that land. Anyone who has come to occupy your land do not belong there. And they don't need, and that occupation must end right now. Speaking up against occupation does not make you an anti-Semite. Never. The ideology that feeds this nationalistic fervor, and that is a state for the Jewish people only, dehumanization of Palestinians, occupation of other people's lands, stealing of other people's property, the ideology that feeds it, it's called Zionism. And speaking against Zionism doesn't make you an anti-Semite. Some politicians would like you to believe that. No, Zionism is a political philosophy. Political philosophy is made by a human. And any philosophy that is made by a human being is never beyond reproach, beyond criticism. It's like saying, if I criticize communism, I'll be anti-Chinese. It's as ridiculous as that. If I criticize capitalism, am I against the West? No! I have every right to criticize capitalism because it's an ideology created by man, by human. Communism is made by human. We can criticize it. We can criticize the extremism from the Muslim community, left, right, and center, no problem. In fact, you know what, brothers and sisters? You can criticize Islam all you like. We don't mind. Go ahead. It doesn't bother me. Whether it is Islam, whether it is Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, every religion is open to criticism. Respectfully, of course. But dehumanization, brutalization, occupation, racism, apartheid does not deserve a single moment's attention and should not be given any legitimacy under any discussions or discourse ever. So don't be afraid. Call out your MP. Write to your local MP and ask your local MP what is their position on occupation of Palestinian land. What is their position on apartheid of Palestinian people? What is their position on racist policies of Israel? Somebody said to me the other day, why do you say this? How do you say it's racist policy? Brothers and sisters, you answer me this question. I'll finish inshallah soon. I took my children, myself and my children, my wife, to Palestine. We went to Masjid Ibrahim in Hebron. We went there. And my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter at that time, she was walking on the road. An Israeli soldier with a machine gun came and said to my daughter, get off this road now! My daughter said, why? Because this road is only for Jewish people. The soldier said to my daughter, 9-year-old daughter, I heard it with my own ears, and everybody who was with me, 45 of us, he said, this road is only for Jewish people. There are roads for Jewish people. There are laws for Jewish people. There are areas for Jewish people. There are walls that are for Jewish people. If there are roads, if there are areas, if there are streets, if there are districts only for one race, that's called a racist space. That's called a racist state. It's called an apartheid state. One law for one people, another law for another people. That's called apartheid. And when we had apartheid in South Africa, we came together to bring it to an end. Israel must be accountable for what it has done to the Palestinian people. Brutalization and occupation must end now. Palestine must be free, inshallah. Must be free. Without the justice and freedom to Palestinian people, there will be no peace in the whole world. Because world peace depends on peace and justice for the Palestinian people. I tell you. Do you know why? Because that land, Allah says in the Quran, بَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ and that land is blessed. When blessings have been destroyed, when it is violent and peace has been destroyed, it's a problem for the world. I want to see peace in Palestine. We all want to see peace in Palestine. I want to see Muslims, Christians, Jews living together as brothers and sisters in humanity and as the family of Abraham, without fighting, without arguing, just like they've done for years until the Zionist philosophy and movement inspired the creation of an apartheid state. Until then, I want to see restoration and peace and stability that we live for all people, equality for all people. Do you hear me very clearly? I am not anti-Semitic, never have been, never will be. If my brothers who are Jewish or my sisters who are Jewish are ever attacked, I will lay my life to protect their honor, because that's what Islam tells me, to protect everyone's lives and give up my life if it's needed. But I will never support apartheid and racism, never support occupation of a land, I'll never support racism in any part of the world, and nobody should support it either. Do you understand my message clearly? My message is very clear. We Muslims stand for peace and justice for all people, at all times, in all parts of the world. We stand for freedom of all people, in all parts of the world. And we stand for the freedom of Palestinian people, their right to self-determination, their right to exist, and their right to live freely, without prejudice, without bombs, without guns, and without their homes being demolished. Are you clear about that? Are we all clear about it? We are. We need to be very clear about it. May Allah, my brothers and sisters, forgive us for our failures. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, free Al-Aqsa from occupation, Ya Allah. Free Palestine from occupation, Ya Allah. Restore peace and stability in that land, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, return equality on that land, Ya Allah. Restore peace and justice in that land, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Akramul Akramin. Remove occupation, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, remove apartheid, Ya Allah. Remove racism, Ya Allah. Remove brutalization, Ya Allah. Remove all sorts of prejudices from this world, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Akramul Akramin. Enable the people of the world to see the truth, Ya Allah. Enable the people of the world to join together against racism and inequality, Ya Allah. Ya Akramul Akramin, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. We pray for our brothers and sisters who lost their lives in Palestine, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, accept them as shuhada, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Akramul Akramin. Those who are alive, give them the strength and the patience to be able to withstand this challenge, Ya Allah. Ya Akramul Akramin, the Arab rulers, the Muslim rulers, the neighboring rulers of miserably failed the Muslims, Ya Allah. If they have no hidayah in their destiny, remove them, Ya Allah. Restore them with better rulers, Ya Allah. Free the entire world from all the tyranny and tyrants, Ya Allah. Free the world from dictators and despots, Ya Allah. Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Establish on this earth freedom and justice for all people, Ya Allah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروني ولا تكفرون والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقم الصلاة.
Jazakumullah khairan on that wonderful inspiration and education that Allah extract. I'll hand over to our brother Uthman to make the announcements of Jumu'ah. Over to you, Uthman.
My brothers and sisters, come up with a few announcements to make. First of all, I'd like to remind all of you on the health and safety. There is no wudu or toilet facilities. We remind you that you must take this health and safety very seriously. So please wear your mask, fully covering your mouth and nose at all times when you use mask. The Indian environment is only increased. Please do not come to the masjid if you or any one of your family is ill or travel from abroad. And please report all verbal abuse. This is something we cannot accept. It would be called hate crime or Islamic phobia. It's only increased since the conflict of Palestine. So please, brothers and sisters, if you're abused in any way, please let us know so we can take the appropriate action and point in the right direction. We at LICS have now launched a Palestinian crisis appeal. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine are being killed, injured, and made homeless. We need to help so they can have access to clean water, electric, sanitation, food, and clothing and shelter. So please, brothers, please donate generously. The situation is very dangerous. So please help. I want to thank brothers Shiraz and Javed, who raised £2,500 from the selling of cakes. So please, Alhamdulillah, thank the brothers. And there's a wonderful brother called Aziz. We need to thank him. Most of you have seen him directing you in sitting down at Ramadan. And during Ramadan, he did all the broadcasting live stories to those who couldn't attend the mosque. This brother managed to raise for the 2,500 match funding of the amount raised. That makes us, we raised a total of 5,000. Alhamdulillah, and thank his brother, and may Allah reward him and his family. And don't forget the mosque also need your donations. So please, brothers and sisters, please help us to help others. Pass over the brother. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for those announcements. Brothers and sisters, just very quickly, do remember everyone that recently may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all Jannah himself. Please do remember all of our brothers and sisters who are ill, who are sick. We have a very young brother, aged 43, who was badly injured in a motorcycle accident in Mauritius. His family has asked us to please make dua for him. He, at this present moment in time, has no movement in his arms and legs. So the family are very, very concerned. They've asked for our sincere duas. So please do remember him as well. Jazakumullah khair. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا تواصلوا يرحمني ويرحمكم الله. Make the last one, please. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all lots of Jumu'ahs. Brothers and sisters, if I can ask you to please, any group you quietly, please continue to wear your mask, covering your nose and mouth at all times until you leave the building. In a systematic matter, as you do every week, inshallah, please. Please leave in a systematic manner as you always do. Last one first. Without the hood, brothers and sisters, follow his directions, inshallah. We have our buckets, brothers and sisters, for the Palestinian crisis appeal. As the Imam mentioned before, that please donate generously on your way out. We have them at all of the exit points, so please do donate generously on your way out to the Palestine crisis appeal. So,